Identity still gets treated like a gate, a login page, a directory, a border around an app. But work doesn't happen at your border anymore, and that's where the old model starts failing. Your customers move across channels, your partners move across tenants, and your contractors move in and out of projects every single day. Now we have AI agents and automated workflows that need access too, and they often do it without ever touching the need path your old identity stack expected. The business asks for speed and reach, but the identity layer answers with forms, passwords, duplicate accounts, and manual proof. That creates two failures at once. Users drop off because the friction is too high, and attackers get bigger targets because the data is scattered. Research on modern CIM keeps showing the same pattern over and over. Hard registration loses users, password problems flood your support desk, and better sign-in flows improve first-time success almost immediately. So before we talk about Entra external ID, portable trust, or verifiable credentials, we need to define the real break in the model. The death of the perimeter. The old identity model came from a simple assumption. People came to your system, on your network, through your app, and on your terms. The logic was that if you controlled that boundary well enough, you controlled trust. That model fit a world of employees and corporate devices where everything stayed inside one organization. That world is gone, but the model stayed. In most organizations, identity architecture still thinks like an internal control system, while the business now runs like an ecosystem. Users move between suppliers, resellers, customer portals, and shared workspaces without stopping to think about which directory owns them. They just need to get work done, buy a product, or approve a contract. That mismatch creates the trust gap. The business wants more partner growth and faster onboarding, but the identity stack responds with another sign-up form and another isolated user store. You can see the structural problem here. Reach expands outward, but trust still gets rebuilt from scratch inside every single application boundary. And every time that happens, you pay twice. First, the user pays. Research shows that 73% of consumers abandon purchases because registration is too cumbersome, which means this isn't just a design detail. It's a revenue leak caused by identity friction. The person was ready to move, but your proof model asked them to stop, type, wait, and eventually give up. Then the organization pays. Password issues still drive 40 to 60% of authentication support requests. The same architecture that hurts your conversion rate also creates massive service desk load and cleanup work for teams that should be doing better things. Now look at the security side. Centralized identity silos don't just slow people down, they also concentrate your risk. If every external journey depends on your central store holding more data and more duplicated records, you've created a better breach target while calling it control. The attacker only needs to find one weak path, while your users have to survive every single one. This is where internal IAM logic and external identity reality finally split apart. Internal IAM is built around workforce control for known employees on known devices. External identity isn't like that. Customer identity, partner identity, and machine identity all work in a much more fluid system. Trust has to cross company lines and legal boundaries without turning every interaction into a help desk event. And one level deeper, even the language gets people stuck. Leaders still talk about user management, as if the job is just storing records and granting access. But for external identity, the job is much bigger. You need to verify the right thing at the right moment with the least amount of friction possible. Sometimes that's a passkey, and sometimes it's a claim about a certification, a role, or a contract. That's why identity now hits more than just security outcomes. It hits conversion, it hits onboarding speed, and it hits how fast a new product can launch without creating another silo. Once you see identity as part of your growth infrastructure, the perimeter model stops looking old. It starts looking expensive. So the question changes. It's not, how do we protect the border better? The better question is, what replaces a border model when trust has to travel? Why portable identity changes the model? Portable identity changes the starting point. Instead of rebuilding trust inside every app, every portal, and every partner flow, you let trusted proof travel with the person or system that needs to act. That sounds simple, but it changes the whole structure. You are no longer asking if you have an account for a specific user sitting in a database. Instead, you are asking what you need this party to prove right now and whether you can verify that proof under your current policy. That is the move from account-centric identity to claim-centric identity. In the old approach, the account is the asset. You create it, store it, enrich it, and protect it, but then you end up copying it into more places than you ever wanted. In the newer approach, the claim is the asset. Are you a certified partner? Are you over a certain age? Are you approved for this transaction? Are you still employed by the supplier you represent? Those are different questions, and they do not all need the same answer format. This clicked for a lot of teams once passkeys started getting real traction. The goal was not just to remove passwords. The deeper shift was that sign-in started relying less on shared secrets and more on stronger proof tied to the user and the device. Microsoft reported that passkey logins are 3 times faster than passwords and 8 times faster than a password plus MFA. But the lesson here is not only about speed, it is the fact that better proof can lower friction and increase security at the same time. Now, when people hear decentralized identity, they often jump to the wrong conclusion. They think it means no central control, no policy, or maybe even no enterprise role, but that is not the model. Decentralized identity in practical enterprise terms means trust does not depend on one giant record store being the only source of truth. Instead, issuers provide verifiable proofs, holders present only what is needed, and verifiers check that proof against policy. Selective disclosure matters here. If a partner needs to prove their certification status, they should not need to hand over every profile detail sitting in some old onboarding form. If a customer needs to prove eligibility, they should not have to recreate the same identity story in every single channel. Portable identity narrows the exchange. You prove what is needed, you verify it, and you move on. That also explains why executives get stuck on the word decentralization. They hear less central storage and assume there is less governance, but the opposite can be true if the model is designed well. Governance does not disappear, it moves. The organization still defines issuance rules, trust rules, and acceptance rules. The difference is that governance starts controlling verification and policy instead of forcing every journey to depend on account duplication. So digital sovereignty is not some abstract ideal here. In practical terms, the user controls the proof they present, while the organization controls the conditions under which that proof is accepted. The verifier checks validity, issuer trust, and policy fit. That is a cleaner split of roles than the old model, where one platform often tried to store everything, decide everything, and expose everything at once. The timing matters too because the outside world is moving. The W3C DID version 1.1 reached candidate recommendation status in March of 2026, which tells you the standard side is still maturing but moving forward. At the same time, Europe is pushing harder through IDAS 2, and the broader verifiable credentials market is projected to grow fast through the next several years. Adoption is early, yes, it is definitely uneven, but it is not theoretical anymore. And there is another pressure coming from user expectations. Passkeys are spreading, and phishing-resistant methods are becoming the baseline people expect from serious digital services. Cross-border access keeps growing, and AI agents need trust models that are not built around typing credentials into forms. What used to look advanced now starts to look overdue. Theory is useful up to a point, but after that, leaders need to know where Microsoft actually fits in this shift. They need to know where Entra External ID helps, where it does not, and how Verified ID enters the picture, where Entra External ID fits and where it doesn't. So where does Entra External ID sit in all of this? It is not a magic decentralized identity platform, and it is not a total replacement for every external identity pattern overnight. It is also not just a nicer sign-in page. Its real role is more structural. Entra External ID works as the control plane for external trust. It handles customer and partner identities, application access, and branded journeys in a way that fits the broader Entra model. That matters because most organizations do not need another isolated identity product. They need a way to coordinate proof and policy across external users without building another governance mess. This is also where the shift from Azure AD B2C matters. B2C came from a different era of the Microsoft identity stack. It gave teams a lot of flexibility, but it often did so through XML-heavy custom policies and a separate way of thinking about external users. Entra External ID moves onto the newer Entra foundation. It uses a more graph-centered model and aligns much closer to current security controls. For leadership, that means less architectural drift, and for engineering, it usually means less policy work trapped in custom structures that only a few people understand. That does not mean every old B2C scenario drops neatly into External ID today. The migration path is real, and Microsoft has invested in it, including just-in-time password migration, so users do not all hit a forced reset wave at once. But there are still feature gaps and maturity differences, especially for organizations that build deep custom behavior on B2C over many years. So the honest message is not that External ID does everything better right now. The honest message is that it gives you a more modern platform direction with clearer alignment to where Microsoft is investing. Now, what does it actually do well? It handles external identities as a managed operating layer. This includes customer sign-up, partner access, and federation with external identity providers. In some partner scenarios, that can extend into approvals, access reviews, and automated offboarding when you pair it with Entra governance capabilities. That is a lot bigger than authentication alone. It is identity orchestration for people who are not employees but still affect your business directly. Then there is Verified ID, and this is where a lot of executives blur two different things together. Entra External ID and Entra Verified ID are related, but they are not the same product doing the same job. External ID is the orchestration and policy layer for external access journeys. Verified ID is the portable proof layer for issuing and checking verifiable credentials. One manages how external users get in and stay governed, while the other helps define what they can prove without relying on the old pattern of collecting and storing everything centrally. That distinction matters because verifiable credentials do not replace all CM needs today. They do not remove the need for customer identity flows, federation, or session controls. What they do is improve specific proof moments inside that broader system. A partner can prove certification, or a vendor can prove their status. A regulated onboarding flow can verify a trusted attribute with less data sharing. That is strong. but it is not the whole stack. Most organizations will land in a hybrid model for a while. They will use passkeys in some journeys and federation in others. They will keep traditional account-based CIM where they still need it, and use verifiable credentials where portable proof clearly reduces cost or friction. Entra External ID is useful here because it can act as the bridge. It stops you from having to make a false choice between legacy login and full portable identity on day one. There are limits, and they matter. Public case studies around decentralized identity in partner scenarios are still thin. Some capabilities are newer or uneven across customer and partner use cases. In broader non-Microsoft environments, governance depth may still need extra tooling. If an organization expects a pure decentralized future to arrive fully packaged inside one Microsoft service, that expectation will break fast. But the affirmative model is still strong. Use Entra External ID as the orchestration layer between identity proof, policy enforcement, and lifecycle control. Add verified ID where portable trust adds clear value, and keep central governance where policy and accountability need it. That is a practical architecture. It is not an ideology, and it is not a rip and replace fantasy. And once that role becomes clear, the business case gets a lot easier to see. The business case: friction, trust, and measurable return. Once leaders start viewing external ID as an orchestration layer, the conversation turns practical. They want to know if this actually pays back or if it is just a cleaner way to tell an architecture story. The reality is that it pays back because identity friction hides in places most executives are already tracking. They just use different labels for it. You see it in lost registrations, lower activation rates, and abandoned onboarding flows. It shows up as more support tickets and more fraud controls layered on top of weak user journeys. Engineering teams end up spending months stitching systems together that should have never been separate in the first place. This is why identity ROI is rarely found in just one budget. The growth team feels it in conversion rates, while service desks feel it in the sheer volume of incoming tickets. Security sees it in account takeover risks, and compliance teams feel it when they have to collect evidence for access reviews. Product teams feel the pain through release delays because every new external flow turns into yet another exception path that needs custom coding. The thing most people miss is that a smoother sign-in experience is not just about making things convenient. It fundamentally changes whether a person completes the journey at all, and it dictates how much internal labor you need to keep that journey alive once it goes live. Recent research from 2026 on CIM is pretty blunt about these outcomes. Passwordless authentication cut the average sign-in time from 8.7 seconds down to 1.2 seconds, and first-time success rates jumped from about 76% to nearly 99%. Registration completion moved from 64% to almost 88%. Those numbers matter because they sit right at the point where identity either clears the path or becomes the reason your customers stall. The business effect is visible immediately. Faster proof means less drop-off, and higher first-time success means fewer retries and fewer abandoned sessions for your users. Better completion rates mean your marketing spend stops leaking out through a broken identity layer. This is exactly why product and security teams need to look at the same dashboard, because both groups are acting on the same high-stakes moment. Support economics tell the same story from a different perspective. Authentication improvements, including just-in-time migration and the move to passwordless, have been linked to an 81% decrease in identity-related support tickets. CVS Health reported a 77% reduction in help desk calls after adopting passwordless methods, along with a 98% reduction in account takeovers. When executives ask if identity work is a cost center or a growth driver, the honest answer is that it is both. It cuts costs and protects your revenue at the same time. Migration is where this reality often becomes most visible to the organization. Old-school identity migrations usually create what I call reset shock. Users hit a new login page, their old password fails to work, the reset email goes missing in a spam folder, and the brand takes the blame when support calls spike. Entra External ID uses just-in-time password migration to change that pattern by validating legacy credentials at the first sign-in and moving the user forward without a forced mass reset. This matters less as a technical feature and more as a way to control churn. It eliminates that ugly moment where a platform upgrade accidentally teaches your customers how to leave. Cost conversations also need a bit more honesty than they usually get. If a leader only compares monthly active user pricing between two platforms, they might miss the much larger bill entirely. Fragmented identity means you are paying for duplicate directories, custom maintenance, and inconsistent policies that lead to slower launches. A cheaper line item on a contract can still produce a much more expensive operating model for the business. The question is not just what the platform costs, but what your current fragmentation is costing the company every single month you keep it. Trust is what finally compounds the return on this investment. When users move through proofing and sign-in without any confusion, they see that as a sign of competence from your brand. When partners get access to the tools they need faster, they start engaging with your business sooner. When a regulated onboarding process asks only for the proof required, people see discipline instead of overreach. Trust is not a soft outcome in this environment. It directly affects retention, adoption, and whether those external users ever come back for a second interaction. That is the ultimate executive takeaway. Identity choices now shape your conversion rates, your margins, your support load, and your ability to scale an ecosystem. The numbers can make that case on paper, but rolling it out without creating new chaos is where most programs actually slow down. Governance, risk, and the sovereignty tension. This is where the conversation gets difficult because the hard part isn't actually issuing a credential or adding a new sign-in method. The real challenge is deciding who gets to trust what, which rules apply, and what happens when that trust needs to be revoked or repaired after something goes wrong. A lot of the hype around decentralized identity tends to skip that part. People talk about user control and portability as if they are magic, but if your governance stays weak, you don't actually get sovereignty. You get confusion, or worse, you get a cleaner looking version of the same old control model just pushed into a new set of tools. Research on portable identity governance warns us that without due process and transparent rules, digital identity can still exclude people and centralize power in ways that are harder to see. Executives have to hold two competing ideas in their heads at the same time. First, portable identity can definitely reduce your central exposure. You no longer need one massive system storing every single attribute and proof exchange forever, which improves privacy and limits your concentration risk. Second, none of those technical shifts remove your fundamental duty to govern that trust. Someone still has to define the issuance rules, and someone has to set the trust registries. Someone still owns the consent handling, the retention rules, and the cross-border data decisions. The technology changes, but the accountability does not. This is the tension that actually matters for the business. User control matters. Enterprise assurance matters. Legal accountability matters. Operational recovery matters. If any one of those priorities wins completely, the whole model breaks down. If a user cannot recover their access, the system ends up excluding them entirely. If the enterprise cannot verify enough information, the system becomes unsafe for everyone. If legal accountability is vague, regulators will not care how elegant your architecture looked on paper. If recovery paths are missing, your support teams will just rebuild manual workarounds that bypass your entire design. That is why governance has to be more specific than just saying we trust verified credentials. You need a clear policy around who can issue a credential and what standards that issuer must meet before you accept their data. You have to define how trust gets established and how often that proof must be renewed or checked in real time. You also need to decide what happens when a credential is technically valid but no longer appropriate for the specific context. A person might hold a legitimate credential, but the transaction might still need step-up verification because of their location or the sensitivity of the data. This is where Microsoft provides help in a very grounded, practical way. The strength of Entra is not that it magically removes the hard work of governance. Its real value is that it gives you the places to enforce your policy once you actually know what that policy should be. Conditional access can apply context at the exact moment of access, and entitlement management can package or expire that access in a controlled way. Access reviews allow you to challenge stale permissions, while external MFA gives organizations room to use their preferred providers while keeping Entra in the policy loop. That matters because sovereignty without lifecycle control eventually turns into a mess. A clean issuance moment will not save your organization if access stays active after a contract ends or if trust relationships linger after a partner loses their status. The new model is not about storing nothing and hoping for the best. It is about verifying only what is needed at the exact time it is needed under a strict policy with a clear ability to review and revoke. Research on digital identity governance also raises a point that makes many leaders uncomfortable. Poorly designed systems can actually deepen exclusion, especially when digital access becomes mandatory, but the paths to appeal a decision stay weak. If you are an executive, governance is not just a security issue, it is an operating model issue. You have to know who gets included, who gets blocked, and who is responsible for auditing the issuer. If those answers stay fuzzy, your architecture will eventually drift back towards central control. Operations teams will always choose the model they can actually defend when a crisis hits. This leads us directly to the rollout phase, because governance only works when the operating model changes along with it. The operating blueprint for a phased move. Don't start with ideology. Start with one journey where identity friction or trust failure is already costing you money, time, or control. Partner onboarding is a great candidate, but customer registration drop-off or the contractor lifecycle work just as well. You need to pick one path where the current model produces visible drag, because that gives your program a business anchor instead of just a technology slogan. From there, the first phase is consolidation. You need to bring external identity orchestration into one managed layer, which means reducing duplicate directories and standardizing your federation patterns and policy evaluations. The goal is to create one single place where external access decisions can be seen, governed, and improved. This phase isn't flashy, but it matters because portable trust cannot sit on top of total directory chaos. After that, focus on reducing friction in the journeys that matter most. Introduce passkeys and stronger passwordless options where they fit, and use just-in-time migration for legacy credentials when you need to avoid a hard reset event. You want to clean up the first-run experience and tighten success paths by removing steps that only exist because your old systems couldn't trust each other. This phase proves something to the business very quickly. Identity can get simpler without getting weaker. Then add portable proof where the value is obvious. Don't try to decentralize every interaction right away, but instead start where a reusable proof removes repeat work. Partner certification is a strong case, as is vendor access in regulated environments or onboarding flows that require repeated document checks. In these specific cases, verifiable credentials stop being a strategy slide and start becoming a practical operating tool. The user carries the proof, the verifier checks it, and the organization no longer needs to rebuild the same verification every single time. Once that works, you can widen the governance model. Expand your access reviews, add expiration rules, and define how you handle revocations. Build your trust policies by scenario rather than just by user type, and carefully review what proof must travel with the user versus what policy must remain central. Those are not the same thing. Proof can move, but accountability usually shouldn't, and that is the design split leaders need to protect. Keep one decision lens through the whole rollout. What proof needs to travel? What policy needs to stay central? What risk event should trigger a step up? What can be automated safely? And what still needs a human decision? If your teams can't answer those questions, they are not ready to scale the model yet. The practical move is simple. Pick one external journey and map every identity step. Count every duplicate proof request, every manual approval, and every place trust gets rebuilt from zero. That is where the redesign starts. Identity doesn't begin where your app begins anymore. It begins where trust can be verified, carried forward, and enforced under policy without rebuilding the whole journey each time. So pick one external flow this week, not 10, just one. Map every handoff, count every duplicate proof request, and look at every manual approval where a user is asked to prove the same thing twice because your systems can't carry trust forward. That is the true cost of the old model. If this changed how you think about identity, subscribe to the M365 FM podcast, connect with me, Mirko Peters, on LinkedIn, and leave a review. It helps more leaders find this before they build another silo.